In this video on Google Sheets, I'm going to show you how to do conditional counting and conditional summing. These are ways of both counting and summing up the contents of cells based on single or multiple criteria. You can make a copy of this sheet by clicking up here under the attachments or by looking down in the description. Let's get started. So once again, I'm going to be looking at my big Star Wars Legos right here. In this case though, I want to do a count and I want to see how many of these are under, let's say, 50 pieces. Now I can do a count and see how many I have. And this tells me I have 279. Nothing really new there. But what I want to know is how many of those are less than 50. To do so, I'm going to use something called count if. And I'm going to be doing this on this range, so F2 to F. But I'm going to do it based on the criteria, how many of them are, let's say, less than 100 pieces. So I'm going to do the start of a quotation mark, and click on this little drop-down arrow here to give me some hints on that. And I'm going to do less than 100. This tells me that of my 279 sets, 69 of them happen to be less than 100 pieces. And this number, of course, will automatically change. If I was to change this to 44, that will increase there because now there's another one within that criteria. So right there, I'm just using the count if from F2 to F, how many of those are less than 100 pieces? Let's try that with something else. Let's say how many of those are greater than 2,000. Again, I keep my same range. My criteria is going to be changed to 2,000. 8 of these are larger than 2,000 pieces. I could go for a very specific one. Instead of greater than, I could do equal sign. None of them are exactly 2,000, but let's just say 90. Well, I have two sets with exactly 90 pieces right there. So that is my count if. Now another one that's similar and related is count ifs. So in this case right here, again, I'm going to be counting, but now I'm going to be doing it based on multiple criteria. So let's try this one. I want to know how many sets are less than 50 pieces and made before 2001. So in this case right here, I'm going to do equal sign, count ifs, and I'm going to first input my criteria range. So my first criteria is going to be E2 to E, and my first criteria is going to be less than 2001. In this case right here, I'm saying anything that was made before 2000. So 2000 and 1999 will both fit into that criteria. So I'm going to close that. And my second criteria, I want to do F2 to F, and my criterion is going to be less than 50. So now I'm looking for stuff that in this range here, F2 to F, I'm looking for stuff that is fewer than 50 pieces, and in the E2 to E range, I'm looking for anything that's made before 2001. When I do that, it's telling me that there are 5 that fit into that criteria. So 5 were made before 2001 and have fewer than 50 sets. If I was to scroll through, I'd be able to find them all, I'd be able to highlight them all or count them or whatnot, but with count ifs, that was very easy. I could put in multiple criteria. I could even add in more criteria if I wanted. I could say I want them within a Lego number that's greater than 3,000 or something like that. But again, count ifs is a way of counting cells, but it's a little bit more specific, not as crude of a tool. This one's a little bit more fine. I can input multiple criteria. I'm going to show you a different one. This time, instead of just counting the cells, I'm going to be adding up the cells. Now, of course, I could do a sum and get all of the pieces listed for all of the Star Wars Legos. And that gives me a phenomenally high number. There are 139,604 pieces listed for all of the Star Wars Legos I have here. But what if I want to only add up based on criteria? So this is very similar to the count if or count ifs. I want to add them up only if they fit within a certain criteria. Let's say I want to find all of the sets that have less than 50 pieces, and I want to add all of those up. Well, in this case, I'm going to do equals sum if, and my range is going to be F2 to F, because I want to look at the number of pieces that I have. And let's say I want the criteria in this case to be less than 50. Now, it's going through this entire range, it's finding everything that is fewer than 50 pieces, and it's adding those up. So I'm getting 773 pieces total there. If I was to change this one from 52 down to 49, It's now going to fit within that criteria, and it's now going to be acceptable to that, so it's going to be added to the total. So it's another way of summing, but a little bit more specific and a little bit more careful. Now I could change that from, instead of being less than 50, I could go with greater than 500. Well, I'm getting a pretty huge number here because, again, I'm adding together every number that's larger than 500. I could do a count of these cells, and now I could do an addition. So in this case right here, my sum if is telling me that there's that many pieces. I could do a count if. So it's telling me that there are 82 sets that fall into that range, and they have 100,000 pieces in between there. I could figure out what the average size is if they have more than 500. And this tells me that the average size for all these sets, if they have more than 500, on average they have 1,222. So this is using a sum if and a count if to get an average above a certain criteria. So you could combine these features. Let's do one final one, and I'm going to do sum ifs. So this is very similar to count ifs, but in this case I'm going to be looking for multiple criteria. So let's say my wife said that I could buy any Legos that I wanted. But I couldn't buy any of those new Legos. No, instead, I have to only get stuff from the original trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6. Well, I have my database here, and I have my list of what episode these appeared in. So let's figure out, hey, if I was to only get original trilogy Legos, how many pieces would I actually have? It's an interesting, maybe pointless question, but it's definitely solvable with Google Sheets. So in this case, I'm going to use sum ifs. So sum ifs, and now my sum range is going to be F2 to F. So I'm going to be adding together the ones in here, but I'm going to be adding it on a criteria range. My criteria range is going to be D2 to D. So I'm going to be looking for just this. I'm going to be adding these, my F column, based on this criteria here. It's got to be in column D. That's the range of it, and here's the actual criteria. I want it to be greater than 3. So that's telling me anything that's episodes 4, 5, or 6, or 7, 8, or 9, depending upon how well those are, I want to add together. So the range that I'm going to be adding is F2 to F, but I'm going to be doing it based on D2 to D, and if D2 to D happens to be greater than 3. So only add this one right here if that one falls into the correct criteria. That's telling me I have 86,000 right here. Now this one would not be added because this is found in episode 1. This one would. So these 90 blocks are being added to the total. If I was to delete that, you can see that it's reflected there as well. If I delete this one, it doesn't have any difference because the sum ifs is not going to be adding this one to that pile because that criteria is in there. So once again, just to look at for that, because it's kind of complicated, F2 to F is the range I'm going to be adding based on this criteria range, and if this criteria happens to be greater than 3. Maybe I want to do something that's only stuff from episode 5, so I could change that from greater than 3 to equals 5, so only stuff that was Empire Strikes Back. And there you can see I have a lot fewer there. I could do a count and see how many of those are, but you get the general idea. Count ifs is a way for me to count certain things based on multiple criteria. So right now I have one set of criteria. If I really wanted, I could add another set of criteria and another one and another one. There's really no limit to this sort of thing. Those are all optional. In this case, I have it just set up on one.